Just talk a little bit about your education and sort of your origins in STEM.
Sure, yeah. I went to university, Simon Fraser University. I started in computer science, and I actually ended up finishing my degree in English with a minor in computer science. The computer science thing I was finding tough, and I was kind of wanting to be done with it all. Then I had the opportunity to do an internship at Squire Society, working a summer job. And for me, that was really transformable because I could kind of use those technical skills, but for social impacts, to use those skills to help people. So this was early 2000s. Was helping people get like their first email accounts on Yahoo and searching things up on Ask Jeeves and pieces like that, but really helping people make use of emerging technology sort of improve their quality of life.
Yeah, that's awesome. And obviously, you talked a little bit about Neil Squire. Can you tell me a little bit about what that is and what the company's purpose is?
Yeah, Squire is a registered charity. Its mission statement is use technology, knowledge, and passion to empower people with disabilities. So really how technology and other supports can help people with disabilities do things that other people are doing, like working, going back to school, participating in their community. And there's a variety of programs around digital literacy, just having people have the skills to use technology. A lot of work programs around helping people get back to work. Our sort of superpower is assistive technology. So how you may use different technology or alternative technologies to communicate or get information into a computer or out of a computer. And then there's also an R&D department where we develop new technologies and help develop new accessibility standards. So there's more opportunities for equality for everybody.
That's really cool, actually. Is there a reason you became interested in this line of work specifically, or was it more just the opportunity that came to you?
It was definitely an opportunity, and I would say for people that are sort of starting their career and not quite sure they're going to land, the nice thing about a majority of nonprofits is you really have the opportunity to try things and help things grow. So when I took a permanent position there, when graduating university, I was running the computer literacy program, and I started a computer refurbishing program. So you got to remember this is like early 2000s, but we were getting donated computers and loading Windows on them, and then giving those computers to people with disabilities, and that sort of opportunity to provide that sort of foundational sort of technology access was really transformative. So, you directly sort of see the impact you have in someone's lives when you're helping someone get a job or helping someone use a computer or do things they weren't able to do before. Many people come in, I just want to get an email account, learn how to search things on the internet, and they realize like, oh, these terribly scary things aren't actually that bad. And if I can do this, maybe I can do other things. It becomes a bit of a bridge to move on to going back to school or working or being connected to the community in other ways.
Yeah, for sure. And can you talk a little bit about how your job requirements have kind of changed with the advent of new technologies, or have they sort of stayed the same?
No, definitely. I mean, the joke in the organization is that I'm sort of an entrepreneur. I've had the opportunity to just start new programs, get them up and running, build teams around them, and kind of move on to the next thing. So a program that we started about 5, 6 years ago is called Makers Making Change. And that's really leveraging new fabrication technologies to make assistive technology. So creating assistive devices that can be 3D printed, or doing small run of circuit boards and making assistive devices that can be built for, $100 instead of purchased for 1,000. So always learning. There's always new evolutions of technology. And I mean, that's something we've seen over the time in Neil Squire's. New technology comes to market. It changes the way we live and work. But if there's not accessibility options for people with disabilities, it can be an opportunity where they actually are further marginalized. So example for that is your smartphone. We all have one, for better or for worse. So those came in 2007. And there wasn't really any excessive technology that would help people use them if they didn't have use their hands going to touch the screen until mid 2015, 2016. So that was something that really changed the way the world worked, really changed the way a lot of things happened. But for people with disabilities, if they didn't have that sort of ability to access the device, it became another way they were marginalized and couldn't get information and pieces like that. There's always new technology. There's always new gaps posed by that and new opportunities to try to increase inclusion.
That's a really good point. I know I personally was learning a lot about like classroom assistive technology, especially this summer. So do you guys deal at all in sort of the educational aspect of that, or is it more just an individual sort of thing?
Yeah, our actually prime funding for our Makers Making Change right now is through CanCode and supports our student learning program, which are really focusing on reaching youth and doing STEM education. But we really have like, let's not 3D print a Yoda head or 3D print a Groot doll. Let's 3D print, a bottle opener or something simple like this. This is just a simple key turner. My boss is a quadriplegic. He can loop his fingers through that, turn his car, open his keys. This is maybe 50 cents worth of plastic, right? So
Mhm.
there's always opportunities to sort of, leverage these sort of new pieces of technology. And sometimes it seems like really simple things, but just to have those independence, we've done things like helping people turn on their toothbrush, they couldn't push the power button on their toothbrush. No one that's 12 wants their mom brushing their teeth, right? So doing a little hack on that so they can control it automatically. We do in Eastern Canada have a contract with the government there where we're really working with students in the classroom and helping them get the assistive technology to be successful, and then it carries on with them into post-secondary life too. So most of the clients that we've served traditionally in Neil Squire have been sort of like 18 or over as they're going into the workforce, but the makers making change programs, we have a different model. Many assistive technology programs are very top down. So like, okay, you have a job, you need this technology in the job, but you can apply for funding for it, or you're in school, etc. The makers program is really bottom up. So someone can, request from our website our dog treat dispenser or, a key turner, things that have just aids for daily living, not really like work or school context. That's the main things are used in the workplace. We have mouth operated mice that we developed and other assistive technologies that are used in a wide variety of settings. But that's sort of the neat thing with this program is it really cuts across different silos of where people are bucketed into, like you're working or you're in this province or in school, and it's really anyone can request something that they need.
Yeah, I mean, I'd imagine there's some difficulties presented, especially with developing assistive technology and not necessarily knowing all the different challenges that people might face when posed with those. So, do you think that's one of the ways that you're able to get around with that and some solutions that you've been able to come up with?
Yeah, and we've done a lot of work and also trying to educate and collaborate with different disability service providers, whether that's rehab hospitals or children hospitals or recreational therapists or occupational therapists, and let them know that this device doesn't need to be a $500 thing that you buy through some manufacturer in the States, and that there's students down the street that can help build this for you quickly and affordably. So there's definitely that awareness sort of raising to try to let people, like there's sort of, we're trying to bring two different communities together. There's the maker community that has all these fabrication skills and pieces and, this ability to make things. And then there's the people that need stuff but may not be aware that some of these things can be fabricated. So I'd say we've sort of hit that tipping point of awareness to a degree, but there's always more people to grow our network and grow our community. We've delivered over 5,000 assistive devices. We've served people in 33 countries, which is way beyond our wildest imaginations when we started, how much does it sort of take off. I think a lot of people, especially millennials, really look at how can they give back with their skills, right? Like, how can I use what I am good at to give back to the world? And this is sort of an opportunity to do that for people to sort of use those STEM skills that they're developing and really have a social impact.
What would you say like happens in a regular day of work, and what does it kind of look like?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it would depend on who's doing the job at work, but for me, so it would depend on the day. I do a lot of sort of fundraising and partnership development sort of piece, but one of the events that we do run, and we run hundreds of these now, are these build-a-thon events. And that's where we have a number of people that come together for a day and help build some of the assistive devices, whether that's hacking toys for kids with disabilities or building adaptive video game controllers. So like on one of those days, we sort of set up like the workstations that would be done. So maybe soldering irons and some hand tools. Just as a lot arrive, we give them a bit of like, what are you building and why are you building it? Like, how does it actually help people? Why does it matter? Sometimes we're able to have a guest speaker, like an occupational therapist that works with kids with disabilities that don't need it, or someone that's benefited from one of the devices. And then we'll work with people and they'll work through sort of building these devices, almost like a Lego project or IKEA, where they'll have the bits and the components, and it might be screwing some things together, soldering pieces, connecting it, flashing their Arduino code. And then at the end, those devices they're making can go to community partners in the area. So that's what a standard sort of build-a-thon day looks like. When we sort of started this, so like, this is a great way to fabricate a whole bunch of things we know quickly. What became very apparent to us is that the people that volunteer in that really also have that sort of tremendous sense of fulfillment, that they're able to sort of give back in a meaningful way. So it's been a really sort of a win-win across the boards.
Yeah, and do you think you feel that same sense of satisfaction or fulfillment in your own work?
Oh, for sure. I've had the opportunity to go and speak about this all over Canada and the United States, and sometimes so a few people's pictures come up. I try to tell the story, and I'm like, keep it together, chat. You know what I mean? Like, you're up here to tell the story, not to cry on TV, so to speak, right? So, yeah, it's very impactful to kind of see how sometimes like simple sort of things can really make a major impact in the quality of people's lives.
Yeah, definitely. And what would you say is the biggest discovery you've made either in your field or about yourself while doing this work?
That's a good question. I mean, one of the things that, especially when I started the work, and I try to stay very open-minded and take the approach that I don't know what I don't know, but there's a huge social economic divide between pieces. When I was first doing our computer refurbishment program and was getting computers ready to go into people's homes, it was usually every Wednesday I would go do that. So break out the work week, kind of go around, feels great to get peers of homes, but to go into people's different living situations and seeing how they're living or what they're living without, to do that really opened my eyes into the gaps and pieces. So I had the opportunity early in my career. We set up a disability learning center that's still running on the Ticton Indian Band. And so I lived up on bandland for 2 weeks, and that was very, very eye-opening. Just sort of learning the different cultural ways and how they approach things. And again, I try to not come off as the white guy from Vancouver here to tell you how to run things, and just be very open-minded and add value where I can, but always listen. And that was tremendously rewarding. And it really helped also build sort of that relationship. The fact that I was able to, or willing to live there and, attend their events and learn and help sand logs with youth that were going into the building and help fabricate it, and really try to do my best to walk a mile in their shoes for a couple days. Obviously, or a couple weeks is not the same as living that life for all your life, but really trying to, be open-minded, and, it makes you really appreciate the things that you have and the opportunities you have had. And you see some of the frustrations and the barriers that people have faced and the opportunities they haven't had going through that.
And since we're kind of talking about these sort of intersecting socioeconomic barriers, can you talk a little bit about like the way that these stop people from getting into STEM or even just accessing careers, education, and the ways that your company is working to solve those?
Yeah, great question. We're really focused on our current funded projects to really reach underrepresented groups in STEM. And there's some great work and projects happening for different people. There's, like Black Boys Code's a great organization that's really trying to leverage Black communities and help introduce them to STEM opportunities. There's a lot of great women in engineering groups and women in science. We've had a lot of success with those sort of groups for the country. So we're really focused on that. And so instead of just saying we're going to serve like 1,000 youth to volunteer in our program, we put specific metrics around youth, Indigenous, female, and people with disabilities. And that seems to be, again, really niche. There's a lot of great people doing great work and trying to help equity seeking groups have those opportunities. We've not seen that in disability as much in terms of like those sort of STEM and higher sort of learning and opportunity sort of careers. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done. We're really trying to target that. We've done a lot of work this summer in attending different disability sort of camps. So whether that's like, like Easter Seals Camp or diabetes D-Days, they call them. They're diabetes camp for kids. So really trying to go to where those communities are and bring our expertise in, as opposed to expect those communities to find us. Try to go, fish where the fish are swimming. You know what I mean? As opposed to throwing your rod somewhere and hope that something swims by. To try to really meet people where they're at and bring our services and knowledges to them and augment what they have, as opposed to expecting everyone to come to you and do things on your terms. Trying to meet people where they're at.
I think that's a really fantastic point because I feel like a lot of the barriers that exist are a result of expecting people to meet you where you are rather than kind of pushing your comfort levels to what they're able to do. And I know this must be a tricky question because you've talked about a ton of projects that you're doing right now, but is there one specific project or fund that's really exciting you right now?
Yes, I will give you three very quickly. I know you only asked for one. So let me just grab this piece here. So this is our lip sync. This is what really started our project. So mouth operated mouse. We've built thousands of these things. They've gone to people. We're about to release a new version. This one is a bit difficult to build and it's a bit hard to manipulate with the mouth. The new one uses the Hall effect sensor. So it really does proper 360 degrees. You try to draw a circle with our current one, you maybe get a stop sign in terms of place. So very excited about that. That's something we'll hopefully have released by the end of the year. And we have a couple other projects that we're really ramping up around accessibility in video gaming. There's some great organizations in the States. Able Gamers does great work. The United Kingdom, there's Special Effects. They do great work. And those are organizations where if you're a disability and you're trying to game, you can work with them and they help get you set up with your accommodations and helping do some game testing, figure out your opportunities to sort of game. There's nothing like that in Canada. So we're really making a push at that. A couple of our staff are speaking next Saturday at the Accessible Gaming Conference in Toronto. And I think there's a real need there. And it's not just like, oh, well, video games are just like for fun. As well, yes, but also they have more economic impact than Hollywood in terms of like gross domestic product. And I think we definitely saw during COVID, people gaming online to stay connected and the sort of important how that is really a social aspect and outlet. So very excited about that sort of work and some of the technologies we're building around that to make gaming more accessible for people with disabilities.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you mentioned COVID. So I'm sort of wondering, well, the first question is how COVID has affected your work specifically. The second, I know I've noticed that people discussing COVID has sort of changed the conversation around how we talk about chronic illness and disability. So have you seen
Yeah.
those effects on your work specifically?
Yeah, definitely. And one of the major barriers for people with disabilities of finding employment is just getting to work. Transportation in Vancouver isn't awful compared to other parts of Canada that have like real winters and snow. So people that need to like, maybe can't drive, so they got to get out their door in their wheelchair in the snow to a bus stop, waiting for a bus that maybe comes every half hour. Like there's so many barriers to just actually showing up. So the ability, and I think really the proof of COVID that people can be productive employees without all be sitting in the same roof over their head. Really sort of open new opportunities for sort of remote work and for people to work on their own time, that flexibility. I think that really has opened a lot of doors and opportunities for people with disabilities. For us at Neil Squire, people with disabilities, the majority of them have some underlying chronic condition. So we've been very cautious with that. In our classrooms, it's still just sort of one participant, maybe a staff working with them. We're not doing like full large classrooms again. But it's been interesting before COVID, our last annual report showed that we served just over 4,000 people that year. This last year, we served over 6,600 people. So there was barriers and certainly frustrations in the early days, but sort of changing the way you work and the way you think creates new opportunities and helps you reach people that otherwise maybe what you wouldn't serve, especially people that are rural or remote, and providing online access to services really opens opportunities for people with disabilities by being sort of flexible and having more opportunities to sort of plug in and engage.
Yeah, I think the flexibility is a really big part because, like you mentioned, people who are both disabled and live in rural areas kind of face like a double barrier in accessing the kind of care that they need. And then I was wondering, with a more like
Yeah, for
process
sure.
oriented question, what kind of feedback and like optimizations do you do to each product before it goes into its final form? Because I imagine that there must be a lot of improvements made in terms of user experience and sort of the way that people interact with the product itself.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, and that's the nice thing about sort of this maker's model and using local fabrication sort of pieces is I'm not like making a mold and sending it overseas and waiting 6 months and then come back. Like I can print something for someone, they can try it the next day and go, the screws are over my hand here, or it's a little tight there, and you can adjust and fit it. For the majority of the products in our library makers making change. And I think it's also important to sort of say that it's an open source library. So over half the things in that library are not made by me or my engineers. It's really crowdsourced and has a wide variety of things, which is really boiling up the community best practices. But we try to make sure that people are using it and we have good feedback and experience. So not just publishing for publishing's sake, but our best projects are really driven by a need of the community where there's a gap and that person can use it and test it. Ideally, we have occupational therapists or other disability professionals looking at it and give us the feedback. Some are simple things that don't go through such rigor, but some are other sort of more in-depth projects like the lip sync of stuff. We'll build stakeholder groups. They'll give us feedback. And I'm a big believer in the fail fast, iterate quickly. You're not going to get it right on the first time. So don't try to build something for 6 months and show it to someone. Build something in 6 minutes and show it to someone and find out all the terrible things about the 6 minute build and then iterate. It's kind of that fail fast and build on the lessons you learn as you go.
And do you think there's a certain project or challenge that really taught you that lesson within your career?
Yeah, the lip sync. So we got that going through a funded project by Google, and it sort of had three major components. One, and you have to do 1 and 2 before you got the second half of the grant. And 1 and 2 was, have a product and scale it out to 150 people. And so our first version of the lip sync that we were very excited about was built on like a video game controller, like thumbstick joystick. So, well supported. They're used all over the place. By the time we built a bit of a sip and puff interface on top of it so people could like left click, right click by sipping on it, it became quite a wide range of motion. And the amount of head movement someone needs to move to articulate the mouse was significant. And, we're dealing with people that are using this have very high level spinal cord injuries. So some people were trying to use it and it was causing them significant pain. So here we were thinking like, we got this product, we're all done. We do user testing in the first 5 people and realize like, this is not going to work, right? So yeah, that certainly there's lots of opportunities and a lot of things aren't quite that severe, but you make someone it's like, okay, just for example, this is my palm pen holder, right? So for some people, they might find like, oh, I need some foam in there. My skin's brittle. So changing that, or I need to change the angle of the pen, or I need a thumb rest piece for it. So, and that's, I guess, sort of the neat thing with our product library that being open source is everyone's different, but especially people with disability, their functional capability, their desires, their range of motion, maybe, the change in the angle of their joints is also unique. So the ability to sort of twist it and shape it and get that final 10% right for them can make all the difference, right? So I can't remember who told me, but someone said, if you met someone with cerebral palsy, you've met one person with cerebral palsy, because it presents differently and the functional capabilities is different. Everyone, their goals are different. What they want to do is different. So you're not going to have this magic bullet is going to be perfect for everybody. You're going to want to be able to have that ability to sort of tweak and make it work with people as they need.
Mm-hmm. And besides that product, do you think there's another really big challenge that's been posed in your career? And sort of how did you get past that? Or is it kind of an ongoing thing that you face with a lot of different projects?
Yeah, I mean, I would say one of the bigger pieces, and this is a little less the technology side of it, but can be just the sustainability of like sort of funding to sort of run these programs. They go through different grant cycles. So every 2 or 3 years, you're writing a major grant, and sometimes, there's an election or things get delayed or changed. So trying to just like have a steady program that you can run and consistently deliver is difficult. So we've sort of, bent and changed the program a little bit to sort of follow funding opportunities. We'll still try and stay core to the mission, but it can be that tug pull. If you keep, as a nonprofit, keep chasing the dollars, you can end up doing something that isn't really the core values and mission of the organization. So like our current funding right now is really focused on teaching youth STEM, but we've been able to try to make sure we're teaching youth with disability STEM and make those projects that we build with youth to have disability outcomes. But it can be a challenge to just try to keep the lights on to do the good work sometimes. In terms of technology piece and access, like more sort of access for people, finding the funding sometimes for people can be good. So yeah, I can 3D print a lot of stuff, but if someone needs like a custom wheelchair and the application process to get through it, or especially like a van that has like a wheelchair lift, if someone is not working, they need that van for work. You can't qualify for funding until you have a job. It becomes a chicken and the egg thing. Like, how am I supposed to get $20,000 to get this van accommodated so I can get to work if I don't have a job? You know what I mean? So sometimes those sort of roadblocks appear in people's lives.
And then I know I already asked about some present projects that you're really excited about, but is there a past one that you're really satisfied with the outcome of, or is that the goal you have with every new project?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. One of the ones that I've really enjoyed is adapting toys for kids with disabilities. So if you think, you can like go to Walmart, you buy a teddy bear, left paw sings the alphabet and the right paw sings you some number songs. If you're a kid with a disability, I'm talking like a very significant disability where maybe 5 or under, you're not crawling, maybe your speech isn't developing, you can get the same bear that has switch access. So the idea is you'd have like a button, drop a few things. You'd have a button that can be positioned where they do have functional capacity. They may not be able to reach and squeeze the teddy bear's paws, but they might be able to like tilt their head into a button, a piece like that. Those toys that are switch adapted, if you buy them commercially, they're like $250 and up. They're at least 10 times the cost of the commercial one. And it's not a complicated thing to do and to adapt. The switch jack looks just like the jack that used to be on your headphones or your computers, a 3.5 millimeter jack. So started like buy different toys and take them apart and like, okay, we're just going to cut this wire here and wire this jack in and do it. And then be able to give those to therapists or to families with disabilities. It's great because, if you have a child with a disability, there's so much additional cost and so much different things in your life. And then it's like just to buy a toy they can use is $250, like it's obscene. So be able to adapt toys and give them to families with disabilities is really, really tremendous and very powerful. Even the therapists, they quite often have a limited budget. So they'll have like their 8 toys and they'll go around and like, all right, we're going to practice our cause and effect learning with this child here. And at the end they leave and the toys leave. And I don't know about you, but practice makes perfect, right? If you're only going to practice that once a month or once a month, you're not going to develop those skills nearly as quickly, right? So we're pretty excited. We're just about to launch a campaign we're calling Hacking for the Holidays, where we're going to have people volunteer. Anyone can sign up, especially university groups or classrooms. Well, we'll bring the toys in, teach people how to adapt them. We're driving to try to get 1,000 toys adapted in time for Christmas to get them to families, therapists that need them.
That sounds really fantastic. One other thing I was wondering about is obviously you've been at Neil Squire for a really long time. I was wondering how you've seen kind of the definition of disability change over that time and how the organization has expanded its scope.
Sure, yeah, it's definitely when I started, it was very adults, physical disabilities. That was really the sort of core mandate and where our specialties were and our funding was sort of targeted. In Eastern Canada, we did a lot of work around working with youth and different pieces. And that was not only sort of expanding the sort of age range that we're serving, but also starting to help like people with learning disabilities or literacy issues using things like screen readers or speech to text or systems to sort of help them communicate in the learning style that work best for them. And my work on the Indian ban, and particularly Indian ban, also really helped raise my awareness. The disability rate in Indigenous communities is almost twice that of the population. It's hard to measure. There's certainly issues of collecting data in Indigenous communities, given some of the history and pieces like that. But there's certainly a huge need there. But it was also not just like high rates of arthritis for sure, but it was also just a sort of like, as explaining, almost like the spirit is broken as a disability, just that unwillingness to engage or sort of lean in, and how simple digital literacy education or simple STEM pieces, like I used to do the computer teaching side of it, and I would drive out there in the first week of class and we did a lot of online learning. This was like early 2000s before COVID. We were doing the online learning thing at Squire for a good decade and a half before the rest of the world were forced into it. But I would drive out there and we would take a computer apart and just demystify and just sort of doing that hands-on piece, like it's just a machine, it's not, we're not going to break it, and if we do, it's not the end of the world. Just sort of ignited that interest in people a little bit, instead of just being the guy speaking through the polycom or the headsets all the time, but kind of doing things hands-on. So yeah, disability can really be a really wide range of sort of pieces, and it's a marginalized group that can really expand. It doesn't matter your race or your gender, or your sexual preference or your ethnicity. Disability is something that can happen in any sort of population. So it's in some ways just the world's largest minority group, or the most inclusive minority groups. It brings everyone, has a sort of connection in their life or a couple degrees separation from it.
Yeah, I really love that you mentioned that because I was talking to a disability specialist earlier this summer, and she spoke about how um being the disability community is really the only one that you can enter at any time. Like
Yeah.
any incident in your life can cause that to happen. And whereas others sort of have different criteria because a lot of them depend on your background, it's something that everyone can kind of relate to because everyone has a connection to that in their life. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that. And then just to wrap this up, I know this must be a difficult question, but if you had to pick one thing that most inspires or excites you about your work, what do you think it would be?
I mean, I guess I'll pick two. I'll cheat. So in working with the youth or volunteers that are making it, when they do like solder and they test their toy and it works, like that toy they've ripped apart and they've they tested it and it works, that's just like, oh, thank God moment. Like you just can feel the relief and the joy that I did it. So that's always really inspiring to kind of see the people that volunteer, or and sometimes like we're doing this with a corporation where they're doing a team building day. So some of them are engineers and some of them are marketing people, and they've never touched a soldering iron. They're not really comfortable turning the screws on a toy. So for them to get through that and do it, it's very rewarding to see that. But it's just a change in people's lives when you hear people that are getting a job that don't work for 3 or 4 years, and just how that really empowers them to do things. It's really amazing. One of my first roles at Squire was in communications, to help writing success stories with people and just talking about people, and then just hearing their stories about things they've gone through and things they haven't had, and now what they're doing with their lives and stuff. Like it's hard not to be moved when you sort of see the impact and the change in people's lives. I had someone say like we're maybe not nurses saving people's lives, but we're definitely changing people's lives at the organization.
Yeah, so that was a really great answer. I honestly wasn't expecting that much insight, but I'm really glad that you shared that. I feel like a lot of the times people sort of see STEM and social impact as kind of really disparate things rather than something that can be united. And so I feel like that's the reason a lot of people don't try to go into computer science because they don't know the kind of social effects it can have. Whereas when you see the kind of work that people are doing, especially in the public sphere, that really motivates you to continue to do that work.